Hey guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side Girl, and today we're doing my April reading wrap-up part 1. So I'm gonna mix things up just a little bit. I try to do a audiobook wrap-up and a physical reading wrap-up, but I only read one book physically this month. So instead, I'm going to do a space reading wrap-up and a regular reading wrap-up. This is because I did Galaxyathon at the very beginning of April, which was a space and sci-fi themed readathon, and I read a ton of space books. So I thought I would just organize them and put all of the books that I read that were space and sci-fi themed through the whole month here, and then everything else that I read in a separate wrap-up, which will be up in just a couple days, like 1 or 2 days. So we're just gonna get started. There were 2 space reads that I finished in March for the readathon that I talked about in my March reading wrap-up. So I'm not going to talk about those here, but if you guys want to see my Galaxyathon vlogs, I will link them up here in the cards. So just click that little eye and it will take you and show you all the fun things. We did a lot of fun stuff for Galaxyathon besides reading too. So I had a great readathon. I read a total of like 11 and a half books, and then I read a couple space books after the readathon as well. So almost all of these are audiobooks, so I will list the narrators right here for you guys so that you can check them out, and I'll talk about whether or not I liked them. I read the 100 by, I think, Cass Morgan. This is one I've been meaning to get to for a while because I wanted to check out the TV show. This is about, basically, we have moved to like a different planet, or we live on spaceships because Earth was uninhabitable, and then we're now going back after like hundreds of years to see if it's habitable, but they basically take all of the delinquent teens as kind of like a test group and put them on Earth to like have a mission and see how things are going. And I thought that sounded really cool. The narrator for this was Phoebe Stroll, and I didn't love this one. It was not as space and sci-fi-esque as I was wanting, or even like survivalist. It was really more about like the back history on all of the characters and like how they wound up being delinquents and how they wound up in this position. And unfortunately, I just didn't really get attached to any of the stories, and it wasn't my favorite. So I wound up giving this one 2.5 stars, and I didn't love the TV show either. It was okay. It wasn't the worst show ever, but it wasn't something that I'd want to binge watch, and it has like 10 seasons or something, so pass on that one for me. Then I listened to Empress of a Thousand Skies by Rhonda Belleza. This is part of a sci-fi duology, and honestly, I'm not going to go into much detail about this. It's basically about space princess like trying to take back her throne. This one's narrated by Rebecca Solar, who is one of my favorite narrators. I'm not sure, I was getting burnt out because this was kind of midway through the readathon or what was happening, but I hardly remember anything that happened in here. I don't think that was the book's fault. I think that whatever I was doing while I was listening to it distracted me too much or something. I do plan on rereading this one though, because it was one I was really excited about, and I have the second book as well because it's just a duology. I wound up giving this one 3.5 stars, but that's kind of tentative because I really don't remember much about it, and I feel like I missed some important parts that would have made me like it more. So, kind of on the fence on this one, but I'll be rereading it fairly soon. Then I read The Life Below by Alexandra Monnier. This one is narrated by Alexandra Monnier and James Fooey, so I love that it was narrated by the author. This is part of a space duology. The first book centers around teens that are picked from all over the world to try and live on Jupiter's moon because the world has been taken over by like hurricanes and water, and it's just basically going downhill, and they're trying to figure out if we can live somewhere else. So they take 6 highly trained teens that have specific talents to send them to Jupiter's moon. But before they pick the final 6, they pick like 24 and then they narrow them down. So that's the first book is about. So I don't want to give away what this one is about, but it's basically just the conclusion of the first book. This one is more spacey than the first book. I really liked it. I really liked this duology. The narrators were really great too. However, I felt like this was very quick. It was much shorter than the first one, and it wrapped things up like really rapidly. I really liked it, but I wish that we would have got a little bit more meat and a little bit more detail in this one. So that was my only complaint. So I wound up giving this one 3.5 stars. Then I read 172 Hours on the Moon. I can't remember the narrator, but it'll be right here. She wasn't my favorite. I thought she was a little bit dull, which might have affected my enjoyment of the story. So this one is similar to the final 6. Basically, NASA or the government has a raffle to pick like a few teens to go and visit the moon. It's basically like they're trying to get funding for space expeditions, I think. So they're kind of doing this like raffle slash random thing where everybody enters. It's like a Willy Wonka for space, but there's like a dark, mysterious underlying story underneath of it. This one, again, didn't love it just because it had, again, a lot of backstory on the kids that were picked, like too much in my opinion. I want more space stuff and less background. I like a good character background, but they were kind of like dark and sad, and I wanted more about the journey and being on the moon and all that kind of stuff. The ending for this one, however, was excellent and very surprising and different than anything I've ever read. So I wound up giving this one 3.5. I was gonna give it 3. I do think it is worth reading if you like space and sci-fi books, but I might check it out like physically because I wasn't a huge fan of the narrator. I also had been told that this was kind of like dark and like creepy, and it is kind of dark, but I wouldn't call it creepy. I kind of wanted like a little bit more spooky and eerie vibes, and it didn't really give me that. So that was another reason the rating was a little bit lower. Then I read Stitching Snow by R.C. Lewis, Snow White in space retelling. So it is about a princess that has mysteriously disappeared, and then we're also following our main character, Essie, who is a mechanic, and she has a mysterious past, and basically she's just going through space, and there's all this like political drama with the princess disappearing, and the king is trying all this stuff to get her back, and he thinks certain planets are at play, and he's mad about it, and it's just got this whole cool vibe about it. It had a lot more detail than I was expecting for a standalone, and it was super interesting. They had cool like robots in here that were neat. There was a neat little small romance that wasn't too heavy. It had a little plot twists at the end that I wasn't expecting. So I still wound up giving this one 3.5 stars just because I don't know if it's going to heavily stick with me, but I do plan on keeping it, and I did enjoy it overall. It's just not something I think that I would like read over and over again, but if you like sci-fi reads and retellings, I would definitely give it a shot. Oh, and the narrator was pretty good for this one as well. Then I read Across the Universe and A Million Suns, both by Beth Revis. This is part of a sci-fi trilogy. I still haven't read the third one because I can't find the audiobook, and I really like the narrators. They actually had different narrators. So this one had 2 different narrators, and this one had 2 different narrators, but I actually liked both of them. I don't know why they switched it up because the characters stay the same, but they both did a good job. So this one is super interesting, about a girl and her parents that are going to get cryogenically frozen to do this like space expedition to land on a different planet and figure out how to live there and start a new colony and all that kind of stuff. And her parents are like big scientists and all this stuff, and it takes 300 years to get there. So the beginning of the book is really intense because they're just diving right in to them getting frozen, and the girl kind of freaking out that she's got to like leave her boyfriend and her friend behind. But basically 50 years before they're supposed to land, Amy is unplugged and woken up, and so it's been like 250 years, and she has to figure out why and what's happening. So she's on this ship with all of these passengers that have only lived on the ship because they basically live and then have kids, and the kids take over the ship, and the whole point is to get to this new planet. And so there's all the mystery and intrigue, and there is a boy who grew up on the ship, and he has a certain job. There's a little romance in here, and it was really good, and I loved this one. This was probably one of my favorites because it was heavily detailed on the ship and what was on the ship, and I like it when it talks about like living on a spaceship and all the different rooms and the different things that they have to do, and people that have never seen anything but the spaceship, and they're just trying to get to this planet. So I wound up giving this one 4 stars, and I loved it. And same for A Million Suns, also 4 stars, and had a great ending. I really can't wait to read the next one because I'm excited to see how these wrap up. Highly recommend. So those are all the ones that I read for the readathon. I also read The Evaporation of Sophie Snow. This is by Mary Weber. This was just a really quick, short audiobook. I liked the narrator. She was pretty good. This is a duology, so it's about our lead character, Sophie, and she is basically like a futuristic gamer where she competes in these like digital games, and it's kind of got like a wild card vibe to it, and something goes wrong. Her and her brother wind up in danger, and then her brother winds up going missing, and there's like an alien race, and she winds up having to figure out like what happened to her brother. Her mom is like a big head in the kind of like the government or a big corporation, and so she's kind of had to live like under her shadow and all those kinds of things. It was really good, and I really liked it. It was probably one of the better like virtual reality books that I have read, but it also still had that spacey alien aspect to it. So I wound up giving giving this one probably 3.75 stars, and I do plan on reading the next one. And lastly, because I couldn't wait to talk about it, and I don't have it with me anymore because I wound up sending it to my friend because I loved it so much, was Amid Stars and Darkness. This was the only book that I physically read for the readathon and for the month of April. So this is by Shani Lynn Feener. I hope that's how I pronounce it. I randomly found this one at Dollar Tree and I thought it looked great and it was spacey themed. And I was like, you know what, I'll just get this off my list because it was a paperback and I try to keep mostly hardbacks. And this is about an alien princess who comes to Earth and swaps identities with a regular human girl. And the human girl gets taken because they think that she is the alien princess and she has no idea what's happening because she has been changed to look like the princess, and she winds up going into space with these aliens. Now, in this world, the aliens are on Earth and kind of mingling with us, so they do know that they exist and all that kind of stuff. But she basically gets taken into space and has to figure out how to be an alien princess until they find the actual princess. It was so good. So let me preface that this was cheesy, this was over the top, this was a bit ridiculous. It was very YA, but I absolutely loved it. It was fast paced. The romance was super fun. It had little twinges of a possible love triangle, which sounds so great. And I loved exploring spaceship. I loved learning about the alien world and the aliens' culture. And it was just a really fun, quick, fantastic read. I feel like it would be great for a reading slump. Not overly detailed, not realistic, but just really, really fun. And I know my friend Brittany read it and felt the same way that I did. And we were both like, why do we love this so much that we both went and bought the second book, because they are a little bit harder to find. This first one's pretty easy, but they're not like overly popular. So I did find them at one of my libraries, but the other ones didn't have them. But I highly recommend going and supporting this author because I really enjoyed her and I haven't heard of anybody talking about these books. So if you're in the mood for a very fast-paced, fun sci-fi read, I highly recommend it. And I wound up giving this one 4 stars. So that is it. All of my space reads that I read for the month of April. Stay tuned in a couple days. I will have my regular reading wrap-up of all the things that I read that weren't space related. I wound up reading 15 books this month, so I wanted to split it up so the video wasn't crazy long. I think this was the best audiobook month I've ever had, which is really, really exciting. And I didn't even read like 4-hour audiobooks. Like all of them were at least like 8 to 10 hours. Now I do listen at a faster speed, usually like 1.6 to 1.8, so almost 2 times the speed, so that's how I'm able to get through so many. And I work from home, so I can listen while I work and clean and all that kind of stuff. But let me know if you guys have any space sci-fi read recommendations down below in the comments because I love them so much, and I hope to do another Galaxyathon sometime this year, so let me know if you're interested in that as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you next time on The Bright Side.